Hello and welcome to another episode of The Tigers Down Under, and not just any episode, it's our commemorative 10-year anniversary episode. And with me to celebrate, I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Alex, mate, I'm doing well. It's good to be back on air and talking at a pretty exciting time, actually. I've probably as much as I don't like to admit this, have gone through phases over the last couple of seasons. Got invested in the relegation battle, but it's just a really exciting time to be watching football again and seeing the yet another twist in the City tale.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We haven't had you on for a little bit, so it's good to get your thoughts on how you found the season overall. Like we were sort of just talking before we went to air about the fact that coming into the season it was all just about staying up, surviving relegation, and almost as each period of the season's progressed, those expectations have raised. But it's been fun to get excited and to get optimistic again as a City supporter.
Oh, absolutely, and I think it just speaks into the kind of the shift of football. Like as a fan, so often we fall into these traps of doom and gloom, and then our expectations change. But when the transfer embargo was kind of placed on us, it was, and particularly after only just staying up, by the skin of our teeth on the final day last season, you would have had every right, kind of as a City fan, to think, oh, here we go again. But to the most pleasant surprise, it's actually been quite the opposite. Some of the football that we've played this season has been outstanding, and we were talking about it before we went to air, but just this idea that we've almost built this resilience or this a resolve, and this team of almost lone players, misfits, almost like a replacement style squad with a few really solid signings. They've just come alive under Sergei, and it's a really, really fascinating period to watch.
Yeah, and I think resilience is the word for it when you look at, obviously, the result last night, Bristol City 3-2 loss off the back of the 0-0 draw with Watford in midweek as well. Statistics can be twisted any way you want them. You can look at it and suddenly say it's only one win in our last three games, or it's whatever it is. Home form not being what it should be, all those sorts of things. But how do you sort of, I guess, take the loss to Bristol City in the context for, everyone sort of looks at it and goes, we've got 5 home games in a row. It's a good opportunity to really push for top 2 or to solidify a playoff place. Not off to the best of starts with those 2 games, but yeah, how do you sort of take a read of it?
Look, the championship is such a volatile league. It really is based on momentum, and we've kind of known that over the decade. We've watched a lot of championship seasons, and it's very easy to kind of change tack really quickly and think, oh, we're back in the trenches. But the reality is that Bristol City aren't a slouchy team. Like they are certainly going to be contenders for the playoffs. And yeah, you're right. Like there is an element of being at home where we probably should, be taking those points given what we've seen from this group this season. But very quickly, if we were to turn it around and put together back-to-back wins, I don't think this will be, a fixture that will stay in our memory for long. And we've watched in the past few weeks that when we have had a blip on the radar, Sergei's done a very good job at just getting the boys like focused again. It just doesn't seem to do too much damage. So, if we were to have this conversation in another 2 weeks' time, and we'd had a couple of back-to-back losses and got blown off the park by Chelsea or whatever it might be, then you might start to ask those questions. But certainly not on the balance of last night's fixture. I'm not too concerned just yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got a comment from Red Tiger saying it seemed a bit too defensive yesterday. I mean, for me, the weirdest thing about last night wasn't necessarily whether we were sort of defensive or anything like that. I found it strange that we sort of shifted formation. We went to the 3 at the back, matched the Bristol City formation. And to me, and maybe that is a signal of being a bit defensive, where we're sort of almost trying to match them and neutralize them rather than having the onus on them to match us or to beat us, and saying we're the side 3rd in the table, we're the side at home, you come and beat us. We kind of almost tried to mold to them, if that makes sense. And that was probably the more surprising element for me. And the fact that even at halftime we made a couple of changes and still kept that shape it was only really late in the game, I think we switched to a back four and actually started to look a little bit better. But, you know, it's a tricky one, right? Because I feel like, you know, for Jakirovic, if you're going to try things, you're going to play around with, you know, shape and formation and tactics and all that. I'm not totally opposed to it. I'd rather he's doing it now rather than at Wembley in a playoff final sort of thing. But, you know, hindsight would say didn't win the game. It's probably not the right call.
I think that's a really valid point. The other thing that I'd probably add to that, though,
Have we lost you, or is that my end? Don't know if we've just lost Logan. Hopefully he's back in a second. I'll talk in the meantime. Just on the game itself. So obviously with McNair getting a first start and Giles coming back in from injury, it was good to see Giles back. I thought he looked really dangerous in that first half. It was interesting, obviously, getting subbed off at halftime for Miller, and sort of as I alluded to there, keeping the same shape. We had Miller slotting in at left wing back with McNair still on the pitch. Might be coming back into the stream in a second. We had McNair staying on the pitch for about 60 minutes or so. I think Jakirovic sort of said he didn't know if he had the fitness to last that long. I actually thought McNair looked really bright in patches in that first half. I thought he had a chance on goal in the first half, which looked really, really dangerous. And I think he actually, once he's up to full fitness, might be almost a superior option to Egan in terms of partnering Hughes until at least Ajay is back. But it's an interesting problem to have when you've almost got those really effective centre backs, but you can't fit them all on the pitch. I'm not sure if that three at the backs formation really suits the players that we have. Obviously, Hirakawa couldn't play against Bristol City, which sort of helped alleviate that problem. We only really had Miller, who then dropped to the bench and came on at halftime at left wing back. But to me, when you've got Gelhardt playing centrally in that number 10 role, as he did to start the game, I just don't think you get the best out of him. And I think he's also still coming back to full fitness anyway. It's really about how you actually put the players on the park. And I think we sort of talked about it last week with Mike about how bringing in so many players in the window does mean that we're now sort of into an a mini pre-season with them, just to get them all gelling up to full fitness. In the case of McNair, Dow, Collier, players that haven't had regular minutes to start the season. And in terms of how they fit into the players that we've got, into the structure that we've got. So for Jakirovic, it's a big issue now. We've got Logan back now. All good. I was just vamping while we were waiting for you to come back in. No problems. I was just saying, in terms of all the players that we brought in January, it's now almost the issue of needing to get them figuring out how they were gelling into the system. But I think you were midpoint before, so I'll throw back to you for what you were saying.
That was the exact point that I was going to make. I think that, quite often as fans, we get really excited when the transfer window comes up because you think, oh, who's going to be added to the squad? What changes will be made? But as far as what that looks like for chemistry and, finding, these players' spots in systems and even the players that come on, adjusting to the style and the chemistry of the players around them, we do have to be kind of, a little bit gracious and understand that there can be teething problems with that. And that's okay. I think that's why, quite often the, January, February period, as much of it is an adjustment for players, it's also an adjustment for a manager to work out, what the system looks like, what tweaks, how do you actually open up, these new players, particular strengths. And I think that, it's kind of a little bit harsh to, be looking for any level of criticism with Sergei, given the job that he's already done with these players. And, I'm pretty happy to afford him that extra bit of time to, to work out what it looks like. And I think that he's shown over the start of his management reign at City that, he's very switched on. He's obviously got a really good working relationship with the players and they trust him. So, one blip against Bristol City at home, I don't think really tells the story. But you are right. The formation change was a little bit perplexing, and I would be interested to know what the thinking behind it was. if he saw something in Bristol that he was concerned about, whatever it might be. But it is what it is, and I think we move on, pretty comfortably.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the only thing would be you don't want him to, as much as the players start to feel the pressure and expectation, you don't want him to start to feel it and start to overthink things. You can see managers kind of go down that rabbit hole sometimes. I mean, it happens to the best of them. Guardiola, loses Champions League finals when he's sort of trying to overthink how to fit the players together to outsmart the opponent. So it happens to the best of them. You just hope that I think I was saying to Mark last week, like the best thing that we could have is to have in our next league game against, I think it's QPR, come out, get a regulation 3-0 win, and you go, yep, it's all clicking. There's our formation, there's our, chemistry for the players, and we can sort of go from there.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And like I said, I just think that what we've seen from Sergei has been so genuinely impressive to come in and do what he's done with players that, for many of them are not likely to be in a City shirt next year or next season. And that's, that's obviously has its own management challenges in itself. So I've just been really impressed with what I've seen so far. And I think that the fact that we're even talking about the likelihood that City should be in the playoffs, and it would be failure if we weren't to make it at this point in the season, just is a testament to just how well he's done. And I've really enjoyed watching some of the substitutions he's made that actually have won us games, in recent weeks. Fair play to him.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, your comment before about the fact this game hopefully won't live long in the memory, I think there is an element of the game that will mean that it goes down in folklore to some extent, which was, of course, the squirrel, not once, but twice on the pitch. I've got to say, scrolling through my feed this morning and seeing ABC News Australia picking it up, championship fixture interrupted by squirrel, I thought, geez, I didn't think this would be the way we'd go viral with Australian media in this season, but it is the way that it's happened. And I don't know if you've seen the footage, but, I was actually saying to my wife just before, because she saw it as well, and I thought, look, watching the game live, and I could see the players' frustration as well a little bit, where you go, it's really funny, and it's you can't help but laugh at it. I'm sure the players to a point start to get a bit frustrated that the ground staff aren't doing a bit better with catching it, especially when it then gets back on the pitch a second time. But yeah, with those sorts of things, you just got to laugh.
I mean, it's a good question to ask. What sort of pre-season training has the ground officials at City been doing to look after the squirrel situation? Like, is there a squirrel catching fundamental course in their workshop? Like, it would be great to see what they do next year, because we can't.
Yeah, I think it happened last season as well.
We just can't afford to have squirrels interrupting championship fixtures. Depletes the integrity of the game. So I really hope that they do go and rectify what needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because you can laugh about it, and it is what it is. But it is fun. It's pretty crazy when I think it happened last season, and you go, surely you have some sort of protocol, some sort of catching equipment or whatever. But the fact that they've basically ended up having to corner it and throw a jacket over it, you think, poor squirrel. But it would be very funny if it was the same one as last season. It's clearly, a big City fan just wanted to get on the pitch, but a lot of noise in the stands for it as well. I thought, oh, geez, got to get some of that energy going for the actual game. Would actually probably help the players a little bit, but I'll leave that one there. So you caught the hearts for this one. I don't know if you had thoughts on the three best players in the game for this one, or if you wanted to defer to me.
Look, I feel like I'm biased. Just I would give my 3 points to McBurney, just because every time McBurney scores, there just seems to be something about it. Like, I mean, Gerhard obviously has been almost as instrumental, or arguably as instrumental, and it's just incredible to see two City strikers firing on all cylinders, like they both have been, and it's probably a large reason for the success and where we find ourselves at the moment. But I gave my 3 points to McBurney. My 2 points went to Charlie Hughes. I thought he was pretty pretty decent. And then my 1 point was actually to Gerhard as well. So that was how I kind of split it up.
Yeah. No, nice one. Yeah, I agreed on McBurney for the 3. I thought his goal was really well taken. To be honest, the way the game started, Bristol City was sort of getting on top, and it was a bit scrappy. It felt a bit like the Watford game. So the fact that McBurney was able to get that goal did feel like it really opened it up. And it's it's a shame that we conceded so soon after that, because it did feel as if for a little while at least that we were sort of getting on top of them, and they were sort of starting to take a back foot. So it was a really well taken goal. I gave Slater the 2 votes. I thought he was really instrumental in midfield and played really well, good energy. He's had a couple of good games now, the last couple of games. And then 1 vote I actually gave to Collier off the bench. You know, it might have only been a short cameo, but and maybe it says more about Lundstrom and just the fact I thought he didn't have a particularly strong game. But I was really excited when Collier came on that he was so mobile, so able to break up play, get up the pitch. I think him and Kumas combined for a chance late on in the game as well. Where you think like if he's got the sort of the physique as well, he's quite a strong, he's almost like the Crooks, taller, sort of strong midfielder. Whereas, you know, you got your Slaters and your Amirs who are sort of slighter and you know, maybe more skillful, but might get knocked off the ball. So to have a Collier, to have when Crooks is back as well, I think will give us a lot more strength in midfield, which is really promising to see.
Yeah.
So that was the votes for the game. Before we talk Chelsea, though, I wanted to reflect a little bit. So yeah, it is 10 years of the podcast. We did start this, I think it's almost to the day. I think it was like the 12th of February or something back in 2016. I think, you know, unfortunately, I don't know if Mitch is going to be able to make it on at some point, but I think it was Mitch who sort of shot through a message to the chat and said, you know, lads, you know, why don't we start up a podcast? Why don't we start recording something? I think back then we had Amber Nectar was running, which was the only other City podcast at the time, and we sort of drew a bit of inspiration from them. I think, was it the 3 of us on the first episode from memory?
Yeah, I think it was the 3 of us on the initial episode. And then I think for a while, Mitch went MIA and then he picked up some slack later in the piece. And you also have to remember, Alex, I was pondering this today before as I was looking through the notes. I just remember the dark times when City were actually in the championship, and obviously being in Australia, we didn't have access to live coverage. So you'd sign up to the platform. I know it's Tigers TV now, but it used to be maybe just Tigers Player or something like that. And the way that we would able to access it was to pay for a radio subscription.
Yes.
And there's some dark times when yeah. Well, and the dark times where you had to listen to, you know, to City at 2 a.m. And they'd go away and lose 1-0 to like a Peterborough or someone like that. And it was just, it was really fascinating that a couple of days later when they would upload the game and you could actually watch the full 90-minute slate. And it was almost like you were processing what you had heard into what the game looked like. Really interesting time. So yeah, you're right. It has been an incredible journey when we think about like the world of streaming and how much more accessible it is, you know, for us on this side of the world to, you know, be able to watch the games live. And you know, that's a modern day kind of football luxury that we have. But yeah, it's just, I was thinking fondly about the sacrifices it takes to be a City fan from this side of the globe.
Yeah,
No, sorry. The other thing that I was going to add when you mentioned Amber Nectar, which, as I said, a fantastic podcast. That was so informative for us, you know, to kind of get a little bit more of a feel of what it was like for, you know, the people living in Hull and how they accessed the game. I thought those guys were incredibly articulate as well. They set the benchmark for podcasts. But when they wrapped up during the COVID time, I am almost certain that there wasn't really any like high profile podcasts in Hull running at the time. And so quite interesting to think that a small podcast that, you know, that started by you, Mitch, and myself ended up being one of the only Hull City podcast options at the time.
Yeah, and it's fantastic now. You know, we've got To Hull and Back, who've been going for a while, and we've done a few crossovers with them. There was Wiseman Say, which ran for a couple of seasons, which I think yourself and I appeared on a couple of times and really supported them, which, you know, we've always been really supportive of all of these other podcasts popping up. 1904 Club, which is a bit more of an official one these days with Baz Cooper and Burnsy, is a great listen as well. But no, you're absolutely right. I'd actually almost completely forgotten about just how sparse City coverage was back when we started the podcast, and the fact that we only had 6 episodes that first season, because I think the way that we ran it was I'd literally wait for, you know, a bookend of 2 televised City games where I could say we'll have, we could round up the whole month of games, since we'd have in our episodes almost like we'd say, okay, so over the past month, here's all the City results, pick out the sort of the talking points, because you couldn't go into much more detail because, we'd have like a 3-minute highlights package, or, if you paid for Tiger Player, you could get the full replays. But it was almost like you were waiting for these televised games. And fortunately, because we were a recently relegated side, we did have a fair few televised games. But, in saying that, that's still maybe 8 games for the season, 10 games for the season, not anything close to the full 46 games.
And the other thing, Alex, that is probably worth mentioning to the listeners as well was, I remember we grew up probably like half an hour from each other, and the first time we actually met was at a City game, the Fulham fixture. So it was kind of interesting how we all sort of gelled together and came to know each other, purely through our love for watching City play. So I'm grateful for that, and some of the the journey or periods that we've kind of endured together.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, that trip over to England for that first Premier League season under Bruce was pre-podcast, so we weren't doing the podcast at that point, and obviously we just had the supporters page on Facebook, which is how we sort of knew each other. And I think I remember we caught up before that Fulham game and just sort of said, oh, hopefully there's a couple of goals in it. And of course, 0-0 at half time, but come second half, we got the 6 goals, which was, I sort of pinched myself. Some of those games on that trip, I was there for the Liverpool 3-1 as well. And you go, these are sort of historic games for City.
Yeah, that's right. We didn't know what we're watching. And of course, the 6-0 was the famous Tom Huddleston goal where, the head was shaved. And I think if you remember correctly, I don't even think it went down as a Huddleston goal. I think that was like a deflection or something that, that made it kind of contentious. So, great memories.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I was also just going to throw to you on, we sort of covered a couple of good memories, but also anything over the last 10 years that you sort of comes to mind in terms of podcast coverage or anything else. Like, I mean, I sort of a couple of ones that I jotted down was, obviously the 3-0 away win at Derby in the playoffs was a pretty momentous game, which I think, did we watch that at Cheers together? Or I know Mitch was at Cheers for that one. I don't know if you made it in as well.
No, I definitely wasn't at Cheers for Derby, but obviously the FA Cup final was the thing that kind of ranged through, which of course is gonna be up there for all of us. I just remember the first 10 minutes, and when Curtis Davies' goal went in, and you saw the reaction, it was like, wow, we may just witness something special. And we were severely outnumbered at Cheers Bar by the amount of Arsenal fans, but what a special time. But I just think that, even talking about it now, the kind of nostalgia and how difficult some of the podcasts were to kind of sit through when you'd have, there's been some tumultuous periods of City football over the last decade. And, you'd be kind of talking about 3 or 4 losses in a row, and like the goals had dried up. And then you'd have to get on and talk about it for kind of half an hour, 40 minutes and, hypothesize how our armchair, football brains from Australia would solve the problem. And, it's been a very interesting ride and thoroughly enjoyable too, because it makes the highs so impressive and so spectacular when they actually do occur.
Yeah, I tell you what, coming on, especially that second half of that COVID season, I think was probably the toughest set of podcasts to do, where you're trying to spin positives when we've just lost 8-0 to Wigan, or we've been belted in by Leeds or someone like that. And you're sort of, eking out week after week going, okay, well, we just have to win the next game. We just have to, and then to the point where you go, okay, we're down. It's we started the episode talking about the fact that it's so good to be able to be optimistic again. And it's a real contrast, to be honest, between that COVID season and even the following, like that League One season was actually really fun, because as much as it was a League One season, it was, first of all, I have a feeling that might have just about been the first or second season that was fully televised, but just the fact that it was a, champions, we're trying to be champions of League One in that season and managed it. Just made it quite a fun season to cover.
Absolutely. And I think that you might be right when you say that it was the first fully accessible kind of as a viewer League One, which I remember being startled by that, thinking we've gone down a division and now we're able to watch week in, week out. And there, as you remember, there were some incredible games. The game in that season that actually stands out to me, going back to your previous question, was I think it was Luton away, where maybe Malik Wilkes scored in like the 94th or 95th minute. And we looked, unlikely the whole game. And it was just a remarkable goal. And that was kind of the moment where I'd accepted. It's like, oh, we're certainly going up, but, we may actually go up as champions. One thing that I was actually fascinated to ask you over the 10 years, because I know that you usually set the run sheet, but I have found it really interesting as a journey how you get connected to certain playing groups. And then when, you either go up or you go down, there's this, huge changeover. How have you kind of found navigating that as a fan? Like,
it's really interesting, and something that I've been keeping an eye on. I think I've mentioned it on a few of the episodes this season, is the fact that Louis Coyle and Slater now are both over 200 appearances for City. I've sort of been keeping an eye on where they are compared to El Mohammadi for total City appearances, because I think for me, El Mohammadi is the player that I've most watched in the City shirt, because I think anyone that's played more games than him, sure, there's a Boaz Myhill or an Andy Dawson or someone who I've seen a chunk of their games, I haven't seen all of them. The fact that I feel like we've actually got, I guess it's just those two now. We did have Alfie Jones before as well, but we've now got a couple of players who've been here for good 5 or 6 years. So you do start to have those faces, because it did feel like, particularly under the Allams, where it would basically be you'd buy a player, they'd have a 3-year contract, the contract would end and they'd leave. And so you'd always have this churn of players. And then even under Ajun, you've kind of got this 15 new players in for the window, 10 players out. It does make it hard. And sort of every few seasons on the podcast, to bring it back to that, to frame your question, is I'd come up with different things or different themes for episodes, just to add a little bit beyond just, we're not just reviewing a game, previewing another game. We do reviews of players every couple of seasons once there'd been a bit of a churn of players, or we do a little quiz game or something. But it is kind of remarkable. Like I could pick out a random episode from season 3 of the podcast back in the championship, and you'd have Noah Dicko, Jackson Irvine, John Terrell, like all those sorts of names. And it's just like, geez, sort of plucking those out as City players. It's like, there's just been so many players through the doors over the years. It is. And I think we talked about it at the start of last season, where it's so hard to get motivated and excited about City at that point in the season, when we were struggling with not winning many games, starting to look at fighting relegation, when you basically had an entire turnover in the squad, and you go, I have no emotional connection to these players. I don't know if they're any good. I don't know if they want to stick around, what their connection to the club is, all that sort of thing. Like, how do I get excited watching City play each week when it's a completely fresh set of players and I don't have any sort of connection or passion for them?
So following up, I want to give you your flowers. Who has been your favourite City player to cover over the decade?
Oh, that is a tough look. I'd say my personal bias would say Jackson Irvine, because, and I was going to mention as well the fact that I was very grateful for the chance to interview not just Richard Garcia and Jackson Irvine, and also Callum Elder, as Australians who have played for City. And with Irvine and Elder being current players for City when I interviewed them, I think for me, Irvine has been the most exciting. And I know he's a controversial figure for City supporters because of how he left during the COVID seasons. But for me, having an Australian international playing for City while we were doing the podcast, while we got the chance to speak to him, while we were watching him run out for the Socceroos and play for City, and scored some important goals for us at the same time, I think as Australians, it's hard to go past him as a favourite. I think someone like a Jacob Greaves is also a really fun player to have watched because of his connection to the club, and not often you get sort of a father-son connection at the club, and then to come through and play so many games for us as well. So I think there's a few different factors you could look at there, but that's probably the two that come to mind for me. What about for you?
Look, it's a real journey, like going back, casting your mind back 10 years and thinking about like highs and lows and what it's meant like contextually in different seasons. But for mine, like I do agree. I definitely resonate with the Aussie players. I think it would be hard for us to kind of, disregard what Callum Elder, Jackson Irvine and Richie Garcia have kind of meant in the scheme of the club. Like it's such a connection for us to be able to draw on the fact that there's Australians playing in Hull. Curtis Davies, I find it so difficult to think about City and not think about him because he was also a player who was a little bit of a journeyman who had kind of had like mixed, I want to say like mixed coverage. Like some fans were kind of divided on him, but what he brought to Hull, like he just not only was he our captain and led us through, you know, some pretty important periods, and obviously scored the goal in the FA Cup, but it's like he really bought into the kind of the culture of Hull and just gave us this resilience. Every time I heard him speak, I kind of just thought, I really like what this guy's about. So Curtis Davies, and then the other one that I probably would say is Jared Bowen, because I'm like truly amazed. I'm saying that because that's disregarding Harry Maguire, Andy Robertson. You know, we've had some like absolute prodigies kind of come through the City ranks, but Jared Bowen to me just surprised me so much, like the heights that like he got to, considering he, you know, kind of came through the juniors. Like we almost watched him kind of grow up like before our eyes, and when he kind of flipped that switch to like being a regular goal scorer, and I can't remember off the top of my head what season it was, under Slusky, where it was basically like if Jared Bowen and Camille Grzycki did something, we would like win the game. Otherwise, we would get absolutely pantsed. And that was such a fascinating season. But to see, you know, the heights that he's reached, there's a part of me that will always want to see him do well.
And as I finished my answer, I immediately was like, oh, I should have said Bowen as well. Because, I think in terms of, framing it with the context of the podcast, in terms of, I mean, it's funny I mentioned season 3 because I think it was that third season, so that first back in the championship, which was when he broke through and scored on debut against Villa, his championship debut in that sense. But he's like the quintessential player who sort of grew up before our eyes on the podcast.
Absolutely. I just, and it still fascinates me. Like even when I see him in a West Ham jersey, it seems odd. Even though I very much respect him, like I said, we'll always kind of have a soft spot. He just feels like he's still a City player.
There's part of me that just thinks, West Ham are in trouble of going down. Where threatening to go up. There's a potential chance that you go, hey Jared, why don't you, come back to where it all started? But don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. Just to round it out before we jump into Chelsea, I did just want to bring up some of the stats that just show how crazy it is. We've been going for 10 years. 44,000 there or thereabouts views for the podcast over 347 episodes, which is pretty remarkable. 9 different people have appeared in episodes, like yourself, Mitch, Mike, Dill, Dan, Brad. We've had Ant on a couple of episodes. My wife's helped out with a couple of episodes when people have not been able to appear. I don't know if I'm forgetting anyone there. Hopefully I'm not, because that would be awkward if I've forgotten someone. Probably myself is probably the 9th person that I'm forgetting there. If I'm counting it off on my fingers. But it's a remarkable effort. And the fact that we've been able to kind of push out content pretty much on a regular basis, week in, week out over the 10 years has been really awesome. It's been, testament to all of you contributed, yourself, Dill, Dan, the guys that I just mentioned, being able to jump on. As you said, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. It's, tough games that you kind of come on and you go, geez, so I really want to jump on and talk about City for half an hour when it's been an awful game and there's nothing, too promising on the horizon. But I hear so many different people. Like I think the Wiseman podcast said that, they were inspired by our podcast to start doing theirs. I think the Tahallenbach boys as well have sort of said that, they came to me for a bit of advice when they were starting up as well. So it does, like you said, being a podcast on the other side of the world, to have that sort of place in Hull's sort of media history, so to speak, has been really rewarding and really enjoyable. And at the end of the day, we're talking about a team that we really, enjoy following and watching. And as you say, it does make the highs all that sweeter when we're doing it. So it's been an awesome 10 years reflecting back on it.
I still remember when I was over, we went out somewhere in Cambridge for lunch, and I was wearing my City jersey, and there was this English guy walked up and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Oh mate, do you support City?" And I said, yeah, I do. And he goes, oh, I'm the other one. You know, alluding to the fact that even down there, you know, that obviously Hull probably don't have the footprint that they do up in East Yorkshire, definitely, but even in the country. So to have like a representation of City, like legitimate City fans who are invested on the other side of the world is something that I've really enjoyed, you know, being a part of. And it's just it's fascinating when you think about like football. They refer to it as the world game, that you can find, you know, like I said, 10 people who want to go on a podcast and talk about a team on the other side of the world who don't really have anything, you know, superior or stand out about them. I mean, I say that respectfully, but every time you explain to someone that you're a City fan, there's a real explanation as to like, why do you go for them? And you got to go back into the archives and think, what are the core reasons that I love this team so much? And it's that in itself is an interesting thing. But you know, they won us over, and you know, the fact that I guess that's testament to a podcast that's operated for 10 years, that there's something that just sticks with them, and you know, we've enjoyed the journey for sure.
Yeah, and I'll still never forget the look on the Arsenal supporters' faces when they walked into cheers for the FA Cup final and saw so many City supporters there in Sydney, because I think that's it. It's the surprise, and it's what's fantastic about, I mean, probably in particular the English game, that you can find these niche little hotspots of supporters, you know, potentially broadly existing because of expats or things like that. But I think there's that level of respect when it's, you know, you're a born and bred Aussie, but you support a side like Hull, you know, again, not meaning that disrespectfully, but it's not a Liverpool or a Man City or a Man United or someone like that. It does add that sort of credibility, I suppose, to your support, and the fact that you kind of support them through the highs and the lows, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay. Yes, sir.
I was just saying I couldn't agree more. It was well said.
Yeah. Well, we'll round things off then. We do have the FA Cup game, a small matter of the FA Cup game coming up against Chelsea this coming Saturday morning. So the 14th over here, a lovely way to spend Valentine's Day morning. I think a few of us are going to head into Cheers. Speaking of Cheers and the FA Cup fixtures for City, a few of us will head into Cheers Bar for that on the Saturday morning. So that should be a good occasion. From a game perspective, I think the most fascinating element for me is almost how we handle it from a squad perspective. And we sort of talked before while talking about the Bristol City game that I think I might have been talking about it while you were reconnecting to the stream, but with guys like Paddy McNair in the lineup who potentially not at full fitness, Gelhardt as well, maybe still coming back to fitness after his injury, it's probably a balance for Jukanovic of, do you actually play not really a second string, but it's almost like your newer signings, your players coming into the squad for the purposes of giving them that bit of match fitness, giving them that experience? Or is it you just go best 11, you know, put on a show in front of the cameras and try our best to cause an upset?
You know what? I actually feel like this has been a very, as we, you know, talk about nostalgia and think about the 10 years, this is a common occurrence in, you know, we always think about the cup games, and particularly when you draw someone as big as Chelsea. I just almost think about it as like it's a day for the fans, and we've always fared well in these particular games, like regardless of what team they line up with. I do think that Sergei will be, you know, quite conservative as far as not risking people, you know, who are injured if they're not right to go. He still will definitely have, you know, one eye on or he's probably still both eyes on the championship run. But the reality is that there are also games that the players want to be a part of, because, you know, like you said, the Sky cameras will be there. You get to play against, you know, some of the best players in the world, and so regardless of the squad that actually ends up being put out there, I think that extra kind of adrenaline and, you know, motivation that kind of exists in this game is you're going to see, you won't see a team of scrubs. Like, they probably will play the best part of the, you know, what in Sergei's head at the moment is the best starting 11. And I do think that you will see guys like McNair feature, you know, in the game at some point. But he'll be conservative. He'll certainly, you know, be smart in the way that he lines up, in the way that we set up. Like, you know, we talked about the Bristol setup last night. It's very likely that when you play play against the Chelsea, you do actually, change your style to match, what their threats are, because, the quality that exists, you will get exposed. But I do think that you'll see a very strong City 11. I think they'll just go for it. They'll see it as a free hit. And like I said, there'll be such an excitement and a buzz around the MKM that in so many ways, I think it actually helps our championship season, because if you do get a draw, or, you play in a manner that is positive, and you kind of throw some things at Chelsea, anything other than a blowout is success, and helps, build that momentum. So I'm actually really looking forward to it from that kind of side of things.
Yeah, and obviously Rosenior coming back to the MKM is it's going to be its own subplot. I'm sure there'll be some people who are just kind of not wanting to entertain any sort of praise or focus on him as an opposition manager. But even removing that context from it, he's a player that was in our starting 11 for our FA Cup final appearance. So there's a lot of links between him and City and the FA Cup from both a playing and a managerial perspective. So I think there's a lot of a drama in that sense. But it's going to be a fascinating kind of narrative and watch from that perspective as well.
That definitely adds that kind of extra layer of tail. But I was going to say, like, when you think about, like you said, the service that Rosenior provided the club, his nan's from Hull, like who could forget how kind of, famous like that champ became. And so I've got this, like, I actually would almost say that he will be one of the most well-received managers to return to the MKM. And I think personally, he will be really excited to be able to go back there. What an incredible, you talk about the rise of players like Jared Bowen, how Liam Rosenior is in charge of Chelsea, even to the most devout Hull fans, is he's one of the great wonders, mysteries of the world. But it's fascinating. I think similarly in the way that we like to see Bowen do well. I'm so full of praise that Liam Rosenior is in charge of Chelsea, and he'll be welcomed back with open arms. And I think, of course, there's that added element where wouldn't it be good to turn Chelsea over and get one back at him? But I think there's definitely zero animosity between him and the club. He'll really cherish it.
Yeah, and it sounds like he and Ajun still have a really good relationship. So I think that's all positive from that perspective as well. He's had a good start to his time in charge at Chelsea. I think he's won something like 6 of his first 8 games, the only 2 losses being to Arsenal in both legs of the League Cup. So I think in that sense, he's starting to win over the doubters at Chelsea and in the broader media, which as you say, like I wish him well. I think it's, even from just the perspective of, it's a young English manager doing well in one of the big jobs in England, Carrick the same at United. It's good to see those guys getting that chance. And, Carrick's another one where he essentially failed, quote unquote, with Middlesbrough, couldn't get them up in the playoffs or promoted and got sacked from there. And he's found himself in charge at United, even if it's just sort of temporarily at this point. And he's doing really well there. So you kind of get these situations sometimes where managers at a lower level maybe don't have the resources, or it doesn't click, or for whatever reason, who then can actually succeed at a higher level when they've got that sort of resource that they might need to build the squad the way they want it.
Well, and I also think that, there's that extra kind of added element of the pressure that managing your club that, that you've got playing history with that provides. And so, you can see that Rosenior was very successful at Hull as a manager. I think we all, kind of grieved when we lost him. And, it's funny what can happen, because now we think about, how happy we are under Sergei, but to then go and see what Carrick's done, like you said, returning to United, there maybe there's something about that extra, motivation that it is a pre-existing relationship. But look, I'm really looking forward to Saturday.
Yeah, no, Tuesday. So we've sort of covered lineup. Score prediction's probably a bit redundant, but I guess just in terms of how maybe more a sense of confidence in terms of could you see us scoring a goal? I think scoring a goal at least kind of, sets that excitement and gets the crowd going and confidence in the players. Do you see it as sort of an open game or a bit more cagey, or I guess, how do you see it going in that sense?
I think that really, as we watch this game, I do believe that whilst we'll be conservative in trying to make us difficult to break down, because of the nature of it being a cup tie, you're not just going to kind of sit back. And I think it's kind of the thing, like when you hear, you know, Sergei in a post-match interview, he speaks about the same concepts about, you know, we looked poor on the ball. Like we, you know, it's like if he doesn't like the passing and doesn't, you know, feel that the link-up play was spot on, like he calls it out straight away. And I do think that that'll be his approach with Chelsea. Like we'll definitely have a go at them. I'm expecting a goal. Like I'd be really surprised if we didn't score. My prediction would probably be something like 2-1 Chelsea, but I think we'll push them. And if it blows out more than that, I think it'll be like a 3-1, like run, against the run of play kind of. You know, we've chanced our arm and have come up short. But I definitely don't see us winning the game. I'd be really surprised if that happened. But I do think it'll be a really good contest, and we'll test them. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I think the last time we played them in the FA Cup, because it does seem like we played them semi-regularly. We did play them back in 2020. I think might have actually been Bowen and Grzycki's last game for us, because it was FA Cup, or maybe not quite, but it was you know, sort of mid to late January, I think, in 2020, and we lost. I think we lost 2-1 in that one. I think Grzycki might have scored in that one. Yeah. So yeah, I could certainly see it being similar to that. I think it'll be interesting to see what Chelsea do with their lineup, because, you know, to be honest, I actually don't know what their schedule looks like, but I do know that you know, whether it's Cole Palmer's not quite full fitness and guys like that, and they might rotate a little bit. Of course, we've got the factor that, you know, Liam Delap might come back into the starting lineup for Chelsea, and that's another returning player, which could be quite fun. I think it'll probably be a little bit dependent on how seriously Chelsea take the game and what sort of lineup they put out. I think they rotated a lot in their third round game against Charlton. So whether Rosenior sort of looks at it as, I want to, you know, give City the respect of playing a full strength 11 and trying to go toe to toe in that sense, or if he, you know, takes the foot off the pedal a little bit because it's a championship side and they've got bigger fish to fry, so to speak. I think that could make it quite dependent, but I think you're right. Like, it's going to be really fascinating to see Jukiewicz up against a big Premier League side. We seem to have done better under him against those more possession-heavy sides like your Southamptons. I suppose we lost to Ipswich, but, you know, Coventry, those guys, we've actually had reasonable results. So, I could see maybe a 2-1 or a 3-1 loss, and I think that would be no disgrace. And I think, you know, I think a goal would be a huge... I'd rather lose 3-1 than sort of 1-0, I suppose, because I think scoring and getting the crowd involved and getting the players excited, I think is a really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that just about wraps things up. So we've got that to look forward to next weekend. And yeah, all I've got left to say is like a massive thank you again, Logan, for joining me to reflect on 10 years as the podcast.
Alex, it's been a joy, and I'm sure that before the end of the year, I'll be back on again. Actually, one more question for you before we do wrap up. Have you got a favourite goal in 10 years?
Oh, favourite goal. I'm sure there's going to be one that a really obvious one that I'm going to forget about. I mean, look, I'd say there's probably going to be a few from that Premier League season, for example, the double bicycle kick. But if I go a bit more of an obscure one in terms of favourites, Jared Bowen scored a screamer against, I think it was Forest, and it was either that first season he was sort of breaking out for us, or it might have been the second one, where that goal, to me, your point earlier, where it just felt like if anything good happened for City, it came through him or Grzycki. That was just one of those goals and one of those games. I think we won the game. Might have even been just a 1-0 win, where it just felt as if, you know, that was a time where you just gave Jared the ball and something would happen. And so that goal sort of sticks in my memory as sort of a standout goal for me. But what about for you?
I have the most obscure one, and I'm still not sure why it resonates so strongly with me. But it was the game where I think it was against Watford, where Nias got sent off in the 28th minute, and Kluka scored. That was great, but it was the Lazar Markovic goal that went off the crossbar, and then he kind of followed it through, because it was just like that, the drama of the early send-off, you know, and then the fact that it looked like we were kind of done. And that was a really critical game in that season. And I just remember, like, he hadn't really done all that much for us. And to see, to see him pop up and score that. I just remember the crowd going berserk. And I just, like I said, I don't know why it still stands out so much, but it's always fascinated me.
If we think back on that season as well, then the other one I'd call out would be Nias against Liverpool to make that 2-0 and really confirm the result. Also stands in my memory.
Yeah, fantastic. I also remember that clearly, but there has been some proper moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, like you said, my intention is sort of for our wrap-up episode for this season, which would be our final episode where we'll reflect back on this season. I'll see if I can try and get as many of you on as possible, just so that we can all reflect not just on the season, but on the podcast as well. So if not before then, we'll certainly try and get you on for that one. But yeah, hopefully see you for another episode before then as well.
We'll be celebrating promotion together.
Absolutely. No, that's the plan. So hopefully all goes to plan. We'll be back this time next week. Oh, not this time next week, probably a little bit over this time next week, probably next Tuesday or Wednesday, to reflect on that FA Cup game, which is hopefully a positive one. But until then,